Welcome to Along This Road. Different? Together. What does that even mean? Well, you're about to find out in this podcast. I'm creating this podcast because I know a lot of people prefer to listen rather than read, or like me, maybe you love reading but get tired of staring at screens. So I'm recording my Along This Road Substack blogs or posts or whatever they're called for all of you who would rather listen. This is the first one, written in November 2025 in Cornwall, England. Now, before I start, my blogs are filled with photographs, mostly ones I've taken, but some from my childhood. There's some videos too, so you might want to refer to the blog if you're interested in seeing those. These blogs won't be verbatim what I've written either, since there'll always be a lag between when the blog came out and whenever I get around to recording the podcast. I'll be able to reflect on things I've learned or even comments I've received on the blog. That means that even if you've read the blog, you might want to listen to the podcast. Also, this first blog was long because I had a lot to cram in. Why I wanted to write the blog, my background in blogging, and everything I hoped the blog would become. I figured it would be the place people might go back to in order to see what this Along This Road thing is all about. So, all that to say, bear with me. It's a little long. The rest of them definitely won't be this long. And now, here we go. However you got here, however you get here, thank you for joining me along this road. November 2025, Cornwall, England. This past April, I unearthed a photo of me, age 9, on a road in northern France. It was taken by my mother from the passenger seat of our rental car. I was struck when I saw it by the fact that my parents had stopped so I could take a picture of a little lopsided tree. But then, the more I looked, the more I saw. Just under the tree to the right, there's a distant silhouette of Chartres Cathedral. I didn't notice it at first, but 9-year-old me sure did. 9-year-old me clearly wanted to capture the juxtaposition between that wind-blown tree and that faraway cathedral. I saw how the photo would look in my head, and my supportive, creative, art-loving parents gave me the opportunity to try and capture that vision. Suddenly, everything made sense. Well, almost everything. I saw that I've spent my lifetime doing the same thing over and over again, trying to capture the joy of seeing through this visceral connection I experience through images and words. I always was this me, I thought. That brought me a much-needed sense of peace, purpose, and continuity. The next morning, I decided I needed to do something with this revelation. What came to me was to post a photo every single day and describe why I took it. But I'd become disillusioned with mainstream social media, so where to post? I decided to try Blue Sky. Then what to call it? A line from a poem came to me, as often happens when I'm trying to name something, a poem I've loved since I first read it in college. Questions of Travel by Elizabeth Bishop. This is the line. But surely it would have been a pity not to have seen the trees along this road. For over 6 months now, I've posted a photo a day on Along This Road on Blue Sky. And in December, I started posting a photo a day on the Substack feed because I've learned that Substack is now exactly what I'm all about, the connection between the visual and the verbal. It's become a beautiful practice of pure joy by re-seeing what I tried to capture on my phone or camera, of gratitude for the places I've been, people I've met, experiences I've had, of connection through the conversations that have arisen on Blue Sky. But something was missing from that practice, though it took me a while to figure out what it was. Blogging. From 2015 to 2020, I blogged regularly on Daily Practice of Joy, sometimes weekly, then toward the end as my book Living Love was coming out, daily. When I finally stopped in June 2020, it wasn't because I'd tired of it, but because I needed to try something I'd always dreamed of doing, writing fiction. Learning how to write fiction, and learning is the operative word here, it's taking a while, but it has definitely been my greatest adventure of the past 5 years. Whenever I missed blogging, I gave talks and did podcasts, and of course I still journal. But not until this past summer did I recognize how much I missed blogging itself. I asked myself, should I go back to my daily practice of joy or should I start something new? I've been sitting with that question for months now. This week I got my answer. I was driving through the back lanes of Wiltshire, England to see one of the famous Wiltshire white horses, and then on my way to the largest stone circle in England in Avebury. How did I never know about either of these places? This journey brought up an old memory of visiting Stonehenge with my parents. I must have been about 8 years old. I had just discovered C.S. Lewis and I was reading A Horse and His Boy. I read any book about horses, but this wasn't just any book. This was my gateway into the Chronicles of Narnia, and I couldn't tear myself away. As my dad pulled into the parking lot, he looked at me in the rearview mirror and he said, "You know, the world out here is just as interesting as the one in that book." Had my parents known about these white horses, I know they would have brought me to see them. Nothing would have turned me on more as a kid than a giant white horse carved into the side of a hill. The smile on my face this week was as huge as it would have been back then. That smile got even bigger as I took in the sweeping view, then traipsed down to photograph a tree filled with 2 ripe golden apples before tromping back up to discover a massive sculpture at the top of the hills where I also watched fathers and sons fly kites in the wind. And that's when it clicked. Lately, in every talk, I share what I've been learning about the legacy of love. In a nutshell, it's this. Maya Angelou was right. People won't remember what you did or what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. Of course, the traumas and terrors of our past may stay with us, but nothing lasts like love. Then I say to the audience, hasn't every single one of us had at least one person in our lives who loved us enough to share the things they loved with us? Fishing or football, cooking or cars, movies or merry-go-rounds. I watch the sea of faces smile and nod as they remember their loved ones, and how the love they felt for us and we felt for them opened our hearts. We never forget that feeling, which we then spend our lifetimes trying to recreate in all our relationships and activities. But all too often, life gets in the way. In my talks, I exhort folks to live forward their legacy from the people who taught them to love by sharing what they themselves have come to love with others. Right now, I tell them that's more important than ever. As Anne Lamott recently wrote, hope and joy are subversive, game-changing acts of resistance in ghastly times. Hope and joy are, of course, expressions of love. When we live love, we stop falling into the trap of hate and fear that the world wants to use to divide us. Instead, we see difference as a cause for celebration and curiosity. Walking on top of that windy Wiltshire bluff, I thought, if we celebrate difference when we travel, why does it become so hard to do in our everyday lives? That's one of the main messages I want to share in my blog. I'd come up with interesting ideas and names for the blog, but none of them seemed quite right. I didn't want it to be preachy or seem political, and that's when the thought came. You spend every day trying to live love along this road. Just call it that. Earlier, I wrote that when I found that photo of 9-year-old me, it explained almost everything. What it didn't explain was this. If I knew who I was back then, why haven't I spent my whole life being that me? Over the years, I've come to recognize that perhaps the greatest gift of my parents' lives was that they were fortunate enough to make their living doing what they loved. They loved many things: art, design, acting, cooking, traveling, learning, teaching, people, being of service, all of which they worked at very hard, right up to the end. So how then did the major focus of their child's life become being a hard worker? A hard worker who became a workaholic, worried that being creative felt egotistical instead of essential. You could say it's because I've always had to work to pay the bills. I still do. But that wasn't actually the problem. The problem is that I've spent far too much of my life not doing what I love because I didn't believe I could or should. The poet William Stafford, whom I adore, wrote, "There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you're pursuing. You have to explain about the thread. But it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. You don't ever let go of the thread." But I did. I let go. Why? How did I come to believe that I didn't deserve to follow my own creative heart? While I was pondering that last spring, I received the news that I'd been named to the Monster Kid Hall of Fame by the horror community. Just like 9 years earlier, when I was named Monster Kid of the Year, I was incredibly honored. Back then, I wrote in my Daily Practice of Joy blog, "This means something huge to the little girl inside of me who never, ever, ever felt good enough, the monster I have always feared myself to be." In that blog, I dedicated myself to the following journey and asked everyone to share it with me. Let us all reclaim our inner monsters for the lifesavers that they have actually been, representing the qualities that are our truest selves, no matter what the world has thought of them. And by being true to who we are, let us set ourselves and everyone else free to be who they are. Let us lay siege to the kingdom of compare and despair, and go forth into the world as an army of monster kids, quirky, crazy, honest, fun, silly, talented, and above all, joyful. 9 years later, I can see how being embraced by the horror community became my game changer. Why? Because I'm not a horror fan. I don't like scary movies or wearing costumes. But no one in the horror community seemed to care. Why? Because of love. I was sharing someone I love, my dad, with a group of people who love him too. Horror fans embraced me because of love. In doing that, they have taught me the importance of being different together. A few weeks ago, I stumbled across this quote by Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, a show I loved as a kid. He said, "Star Trek was an attempt to say that humanity will reach maturity and wisdom on the day that it begins not just to tolerate, but to take a special delight in differences in ideas and differences in life forms. If we cannot learn to actually enjoy those small differences, to take a positive delight in those small differences between our own kind here on this planet, then we do not deserve to go out into space and meet the diversity that is almost certainly out there." My favorite definition of joy is the pure and simple delight in being alive. That's just what he says. When I began to practice joy every single day, my life transformed. But if living on the road as a nomad for all these years has taught me anything, it's this: joy cannot happen if we do not delight in difference. And yet, I've spent far too much of my life trying to write, think, act, dress, succeed, be like other people, which is pretty weird for someone who has no permanent home but rather lives on the road as a nomad with her dog. On the outside, I looked like a card-carrying iconoclast. But deep down, I was afraid of being the monster kid I am. No more. Along this road is all about sharing the thread. Truth is, most of us let go of the thread. I've met a lot more people like me than like my parents, people who have forgotten that to do what we love is what we're here for, people who have lost the thread of what they love and don't know how to find it, people who have hidden their true selves away so deeply they've forgotten them. On Blue Sky, I began sharing pictures mostly for myself, as a way of remembering the easy assurance and joy of 9-year-old me. But the reason I blog has always been bigger than just me. It's about sharing my own twisty, uphill, incredible journey back to the hope and joy and living and sharing a life you love always brings when you share it with others. That's what I've missed That's what this blog and now this podcast is. Not me pulling the car over to take the picture I envision. This is me pulling the car over for us all to remember what we love and then encourage one another to do it along this road. We all need to remember what cracks open our hearts. And here's the best part. What cracks open your heart, what makes you want to pull over the car may not be the same for me or your friends or your family. Loving and supporting those differences is the most vital and subversive act of all. So who is along this road for? It's for all of us for whom joy and hope might not always come so easily. It's for all of us who have been scared to embrace our own difference. It's for all of us who want to leave behind a legacy of love, but have struggled with stepping outside our comfort zones in a world that threatens our truest selves. On this podcast, with this episode, I begin the joy of sharing with you this journey. So hop on in. It's going to be a twisty, turny, glorious ride.